Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order, and without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We have an important hearing today examining sexual harassment and gender discrimination at the United States Department of Agriculture. Earlier this year, the committee held 2 hearings about sexual harassment throughout the National Park Service. And at these hearings, whistleblowers told the committee their stories of harassment, discrimination, and the retaliation they feared in coming forward. While many changes are still needed, the Park Service has begun the process of dealing with their cultural problems and removed some bad managers from their positions of leadership. Unfortunately, this problem is not contained to the Park Service, and I would also say at the EPA, where we've had a number of hearings. But after the committee's Park Service hearings, numerous Department of Agriculture employees who were subject to sexual assault, harassment, and discrimination also came forward to the committee. A number of examples and despicable acts were quite horrifying. Some of these women had even been raped by coworkers but refused to testify due to the threat of retaliation and having their careers destroyed. I don't even begin to comprehend or understand how one instance of this behavior is not considered an immediate crisis. That is just beyond me. This isn't the first time the issue has been raised at the Department of Agriculture, and thus this hearing, because this is the deep concern. In 2008, the committee held a hearing regarding sexual harassment and discrimination at the United States Department of Agriculture. Lisa Donnelly, who is with us today, also testified at that hearing. Back then, she pled for us for help for the employees of the Forest Service who were sexually assaulted and then retaliated against. Even worse, when these concerns were raised at the department level, they were dismissed as isolated incidents. After 8 years of in the current situation, we need to review what has changed and what still needs to be fixed. And based on what we've been reading in the leading up to this hearing, it doesn't look good, not in the least. Last year, the Office of Special Counsel, the OSC, sent letters to the President about the failings of the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Agriculture. We lean heavily on the Office of Special Counsel. It is unusual that they have to go to this length to actually send a letter to the President about the failings. But the Office of Special Counsel found that the office failed to process complaints in a timely manner and that the Office of Civil Rights leadership had an unusual high number of complaints against their own personnel. How can employees trust the Office of Civil Rights when its own leadership is alleged to be discriminating? Even worse, when the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, tried to investigate this problem, the Department failed to produce documents and generally dismissed staff concerns. That's why the ranking member and I sent another letter just last week requesting the documents that the Department refused to provide. It is frowned upon at best. It is unacceptable and very frustrating to have this happen. In addition to Ms. Donnelly, I'd like to acknowledge we are joined today by a Forest Service employee testifying in a whistleblower capacity. She should be applauded for agreeing to come forward despite the fear of possible retaliation. It is difficult to do this. It is not her first choice in life. I'm sure this is not something that she ever thought that she would be doing, but we appreciate the brave approach and willingness to represent what is unfortunately a significant number of women. However, the committee staff spoke with numerous other employees who were so scared of retaliation they wouldn't come forward publicly, but we do appreciate Ms. Rice and her willingness to be with here today. I want to be absolutely clear, that any retaliation against any witness before this committee or a victim of sexual harassment is totally, completely unacceptable and gravely concerns the committee. And I can promise you and assure you that Mr. Cummings and I, as well as members on both sides of this aisle, will fight and push and defend these people who are whistleblowers who are trying to do what is right for the country, trying to do what's right for them personally, and trying to do what's right for their fellow employees. So I want to thank the ranking member and his staff for their work on this issue. I know he takes the threat of retaliation against whistleblowers as seriously as we do. We are united, locked in arm on this, and look forward to a good, hearty hearing. But with that, I want to thank again the witnesses for being here today, and now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings of Maryland.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I want to start off where you ended. Without question, Mr. Chairman, I agree with you that we stand hand in hand with regard to making sure that whistleblowers are not victims of retaliation. And we've said it many times, and sometimes I wonder whether folk in the various departments really hear us. But I want to make it real clear that I will fight for a whistleblower and fight to protect them. Because I do, as I agree with the chairman, for whistleblowers to come forward, to provide testimony, and after already being, in many instances, a victim, and then to have to go through a process of worrying about whether they keep their job or whether harm comes to them, we are simply a better country than that. Back in September, when our committee convened to hear the testimony from whistleblowers in the National Park Service, I began by expressing the very simple principles that have guided my work on civil rights in the federal workplace over the past 2 decades. I will restate them today. No employee should ever be afraid to come to work. Let me say that again. No employee should ever be afraid to come to work. Real simple sentence. But that's the way it should be. They shouldn't be afraid to come to work. And no employee should ever fear retaliation if she steps forward to report conduct that makes her feel afraid. I thank Lisa Donnelly and Denise Rice for their willingness to come forward today. Ms. Donnelly, who worked for the Forest Service from 1978 until her retirement in 2002, now assists others who have experienced sexual harassment and retaliation. And so I want to thank you, Ms. Donnelly, for your work. You have taken your pain, turned it into a passion to do your purpose. Pain, passion, purpose. Ms. Rice is a fire prevention technician who has worked for the Forest Service for more than a decade. And I, like the chairman, know that it has been very difficult for you to come forward today to speak about your experiences. And I deeply appreciate your courage. Our staffs have told us about how difficult this is for you. And I promise you we will be as gentle as we can be, but just know that the people up here are friends. And we want to make life better for you and for the people that you have come to represent. For more than 40 years, the Forest Service has repeatedly faced litigation alleging discrimination against female employees. A lawsuit filed in the early 1970s. Let me say that again, early 1970s. And another lawsuit filed in the mid-1990s. Each resulted in long-term consent decrees. Despite the changes required by those consent decrees, we can continue to receive disturbing allegations of discrimination and retaliation 40 years after the first lawsuit. 40 years. 40 years of harassment, 40 years of pain, 40 years of lost opportunity, 40 years of fear. It's long past time for the Forest Service to finally break its toxic cycle of sue, settle, and backslide. Sue, settle, and backslide. Sue, settle, and backslide. While many steps must be taken to ensure that all forest employees work in an environment free from discrimination and harassment, one critical step must be ensuring that the process of handling EEO complaints is effective and efficient at both the agency and the departmental levels. Today, we are joined by the Department of Agriculture's Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, Dr. Joe Leonard. I've known Dr. Leonard for many years. I appreciate his commitment to protecting civil rights, and I thank him for being here today. As Dr. Leonard knows, I was deeply troubled by a letter that the Office of Special Counsel sent to the President back in May of 2015, which the Chairman referenced. This letter was unprecedented, and it was extremely disturbing. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen a letter like that since I've been here, and I've been here 20 years. It warned President Obama that the USDA's civil rights program, and I quote, has been seriously mismanaged, thereby compromising the civil rights of USDA employees, end of quote. It stated that the Civil Rights Office, quote, has an unusually high number of complaints filed against its own leadership, end of quote. It stated that corrective actions did not, quote, provide sufficient redress for affected individuals, and it recommended that USDA review their cases again, quote, to assess how affected employees could be made whole, end of quote. To follow up on this troubling letter, as a follow-up, I sent a request of my own to the USDA a year ago seeking information about its management of EEO complaints and its plans for making their employees whole. Unfortunately, I've been extremely frustrated and disappointed by the response I received from department officials. They provided some information. Now, that's true, but they did not treat my request with the seriousness I believe it deserved. This is extremely important to me and extremely important to this committee. And this unprecedented letter to the President of the United States should have spurred the Department to make an overwhelming effort to fully cooperate with my request and try to get this right. Unfortunately, that is not what happened. For these reasons, I was pleased that the Chairman joined me this month in a new request to USDA from this committee for data on EEO complaints filed against senior USDA managers, as well as for internal and external reports assessing USDA's handling of EEO complaints. And as I close, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say something to the Department. You know, I don't want you to come in here and rope-a-dope. Just come here and tell us the nice things that have happened and not tell us how you've addressed these issues and how you plan to address them. These things have been going on for 40 years. That's a long time. And so, again, I emphasize this is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democratic issue. This is an American issue. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any members who would like to submit a written statement, and we'll now recognize our panel of witnesses. We're pleased to welcome the Honorable Joe Leonard, Jr., Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights of the United States Department of Agriculture. Ms. Lenice Lago, did I pronounce that right? Deputy Chief of Business Operations at the United States Forest Service, the United States Department of Agriculture. Ms. Lisa Donnelly, Vice President of the USDA Coalition for Minority Employees, Federal Employee Advocate, and former United States Forest Service employee, as well as Ms. Denise Rice, Fire Prevention Technician for Region 5, El Dorado National Forest at the United States Forest Service within the Department of Agriculture. We thank you all for being here. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses are to be sworn before they testify. So if you can please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. We would appreciate if you would limit your verbal comments to 5 minutes. Your entire written statement will be entered into the record, and Mr. Leonard will now recognize you for 5 minutes. And please, right up front, you got to pull that microphone right up in front of you. And just make sure it's on. Thank you.
Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss USDA's improvements in the processing of equal opportunity complaints and efforts to improve the civil rights culture in the Forest Service and at USDA. As a sixth-generation Texan and a lifelong student of civil rights, but more importantly, as a kid who received his first death threat at the age of 5 when I integrated kindergarten school in Austin, Texas, I'm incredibly proud of my personal and professional commitment to civil rights that I've made 45 years ago. Every day I approach my role and responsibility as Assistant Secretary with steadfast appreciation for the impact my office has on the lives of the American people. As the longest-serving Senate-confirmed African-American appointee in the Obama administration and the longest-serving Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights in the history of USDA, I've had the privilege of seeing firsthand the positive and transformative accomplishments of the Department of Agriculture's programs and employees, while also witnessing our collective interests and effort in continuously improving and expanding our work for all involved. When I assumed this position in 2009, USDA had a long and complex history of discrimination claims brought against the Department. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights has worked diligently for nearly 8 years to protect the rights and privileges of nearly 100,000 employees spread among 2,200 parishes, counties, and boroughs throughout the United States, as well as those receiving services from USDA. At the beginning of this administration, we started by examining our history and bringing to light the most challenging aspects of the Department's past. We made it our mission to change the culture of USDA, to root out exclusivity and build a culture of accessibility. As part of this effort, we created new policies, corrected past mistakes, and charted a stronger, more inclusive path for our employees and the communities we serve. While there's still much to do, we've made significant progress by accomplishing goals such as reducing the approximate processing time for new civil rights program complaints from 4 years to 18 months, creating a universal forum for program participants to report cases of discrimination at USDA, the settlement of Pickford II, Keep Siegel opt-outs, and the construction of the Hispanic Women's Claims process, reducing the number of program farm-related complaints by 60 to 70%. But that's not enough. We've also made profound strides in processing the Department's conflict complaints, especially in addressing the conflict of interest complaints filed against senior managers. After significant review of the complaint process, we took reasonable actions to ensure by 2014 we were processing 100% of the complaints within the regulatory time frame. These changes included, but were not limited to, changing management and staff. We changed 3 different directors within the division, and increasing the training and management of supervisory employees, in addition to changing the vendor that we utilize. Additionally, in accordance with the Office of Special Counsel report, we reviewed all 120 cases that exceeded the regulatory timeframes to identify whether any harm resulted from prior delays in processing. As a result, we determined that of the 120 cases that exceeded the 180 days, 102 cases were subsequently closed. 37 of them were settled before closing. 9 cases are with EEO adhering at present. 6 were incorrectly identified, and only 3 of those cases remain open and are pending decision. Regarding the Forest Service, early in my career, I met with the Forest Service leadership in 4 regions to emphasize the importance of preventing sexual harassment in the agency. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights in its oversight capacity has worked to support the Forest Service in the following civil rights initiatives: reorganization of its civil rights structure to have its National Civil Rights Director report directly to the Forest Service Chief, and all regional civil rights directors and staff report to the National Civil Rights Director. These changes were completed in 2016, and it's the first time in the 40-year history of the Forest Service it's ever been implemented. It's valuable to understand this, that now no one can say they don't know what's happening. It goes all the way to the chief, and it's not stuck in a rural community in a far-off place. We conducted an independent climate assessment of how female employees in Region 5 are treated, including a report with findings and recommendations to the Forest Service. We've strengthened and enhanced its sexual harassment policies and having the Forest Service employees be the first at USDA to certify their agreement to abide by the Secretary's new anti-harassment policy statement. We've also, in the last 40 years, and this is the last thing that I read, and these are new. This isn't the same old thing. We strengthened Region 5 standard operating procedures for reporting and responding to allegations of sexual harassment and misconduct reported to related retaliation. And we have engaged OSCR, and Forest Service has engaged OSCR in the enhancement of Region 5's informal EEO complaint process. The continued progress of the Forest Service commitment to civil rights will be evidenced by this committee's continued oversight in the next administration. I thank you for this opportunity to present our progress. I thank you for the opportunity to review what our office has accomplished in nearly 8 years, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Ms. Lago, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our efforts to eliminate sexual harassment and gender discrimination in the Forest Service. I've been a Forest Service employee for 27 years. Before my career in the Forest Service, I worked in private industry, and in that job, I was the target of sexual harassment. I was young. I didn't report what I experienced to management. I know firsthand the pain and the shame and the difficulty of talking about these issues. I want to acknowledge the courage and share my respect for Ms. Donnelly and especially Ms. Rice for coming here today to testify. My experience is also why I am so committed to eliminating all forms of harassment and discrimination from the Forest Service. I'm deeply committed to these issues and making our workplace and our working environment a place where all employees are given an opportunity to succeed and thrive based on their talent. Throughout my career in the Forest Service, I've also experienced the dedication and commitment of our employees at all levels to work together for a working environment that's free of harassment, where all employees can thrive. I believe we're making and sustaining progress, and there's more that we need to do. Specifically, in the last 5 years, we've improved our capacity to respond to misconduct, and specifically claims of harassment and sexual harassment. The misconduct branch now reports directly to me. The civil rights and EEO branch report directly to the chief. We have a national review and assessment team to provide top-level oversight to ensure consistency, maintain, to avoid favoritism, and keep our eyes on the most important issues. We've implemented a revised anti-harassment policy addressing any type of harassment and mandating reporting and investigating timeframes. We publish quarterly data on misconduct, which both educates the workforce on unacceptable behavior and demonstrates that perpetrators are held accountable. We are improving, and we are not done. I know that there have been stories in the press recently regarding sexual harassment in the Forest Service. Those stories are disturbing and hard to read. I can't discuss cases that are the subject of litigation or ongoing investigation, but I sincerely want to help you help me. Where we have completed investigations of misconduct, I'm willing to share those to the extent permitted by law. I share your concern for employee welfare and safety. I look forward to working with you and the members on this panel to improve what we're currently doing. And while I still have a minute, I want to assure you, we investigate all allegations. We hold people accountable. We publish the results so the rest of the workforce knows what we're doing, so it's visible and transparent. And we train and train and train our workforce on acceptable behavior, our leaders on acceptable behavior, and the procedures in the event they experience unacceptable behavior. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Donnelly, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member.
Pull that microphone just a little bit closer, if you would. Put it right up there.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Chaffetz, Ranking Member Cummings, and committee members, thank you for inviting me here today to testify about sexual harassment and Discrimination at the USDA Forest Service. My name is Lisa Donnelly. I worked for the USDA Forest Service in Region 5, California, in positions of administrative and fire support from 1978 to 2002. I'm the Vice President of the USDA Coalition of Minority Employees. It is a USDA-sanctioned independent organization that assists USDA employees in issues of harassment, discrimination, hostile work environment, and reprisal. In 2008, President Emeritus Lawrence Lucas and I testified before this committee, and along with current President Ron Cotton, have been invited to the White House 3 times under the previous administration to discuss harassment, discrimination, and reprisal against USDA employees and black farmers. I watched the recent hearing on the Park Service, and I could not help but notice the difference between Secretary Jewell's response to our 2014 report of sexual harassment at the Grand Canyon and Secretary Vilsack's response to the same issues. I commend Secretary Jewell's quick call for an investigation, transparency, and decision to open up the investigation across the entire Park Service. It is a far cry from Secretary Vilsack's actions. We have been reporting egregious incidents of sexual harassment, workplace violence, job discrimination, and reprisal to Secretary Vilsack since 2009 to no avail. Before any cultural change can occur, the agency must acknowledge the scope of the problem and be willing to make a good faith effort to change it. Despite mountains of evidence, USDA and Forest Service have been unwilling to do this. Forest Service management will not investigate complaints properly, they will not hold discriminators accountable, they will not settle EEO complaints. To emphasize the enormity of the problem, it is important to point out that Region 5 was under court-ordered oversight to address gender discrimination from 1971 through 2006, over 30 consecutive years. I was present in the agency during those 30 years in between. The Forest Service was unwilling to make an honest effort to increase diversity under the 1971 Bernardi v. Madigan class action consent decree. Forest Service management fomented an attitude that unqualified women were taking men's jobs and were only hired to satisfy diversity requirements. This attitude became a cultural norm, and it plagues us to this day. The backlash against women hired under Bernardi was tremendous. And in 1994, just 6 months before Bernardi ended, I filed the Donnelly v. Glickman class action on behalf of 6,000 women in Region 5 based on harassment, sexual harassment, hostile work environment, and reprisal. The second court-ordered consent decree lasted through 2006. Working conditions did improve for that short period of time, but by 2008, I started contacting the Secretary and the Chief, again, about discrimination, assaults, and reprisal. Again, they were non-responsive. I wrote letters to Secretary Vilsack, Chief Tidwell, President Obama, Valerie Jarrett, Michelle Obama, and I even wrote to Mrs. Vilsack asking for help. There was no response from anyone. In 2011, we finally got a response. Valerie Jarrett's staff contacted me and said that President Obama was concerned about the harassment and violence against women in Region 5. He advised the Secretary to correct the problems out here. The Secretary was unwilling to do so, and conditions for women did not improve, and in fact, they've worsened. Additionally, in 2011, the Coalition of Minority Employees and several female firefighters met with Secretary Vilsack and Chief Tidwell. In the entire discussion, Secretary Vilsack's only answer to our concerns was to discuss the success of his cultural transformation program. I question how Secretary Vilsack can view his civil rights program successful when women are raped but are unable to report it due to the retaliatory culture. And if you go out in the Forest Service and speak to any employee in the field and ask them about the cultural transformation and what it means to them, 99% will tell you, I have no idea what it is. In 2013, the Coalition and several Region 5 female firefighters met with Secretary Vilsack and Chief Tidwell's staff. Just prior to traveling to Washington, I received a call from a female firefighter that had been raped by a male coworker but would not report it. She didn't report it because she knew Elisa Dabney had been fired for reporting an attempted rape. There are many women suffering in this manner. When I shared this information with officials in the meeting, I received only a platitude. We do not, there's zero tolerance for sexual harassment, hostile work environment. We've heard it over and over, and it's just lip service. Their failure to deal with these issues resulted in another class action, the Bush v. Vilsack female firefighter class action that was filed in August 2014. In January 2015, the agency agreed to mediate the Bush v. Vilsack class complaint. At a huge cost to the taxpayer, 6 class agents met in San Francisco with USDA officials. To our great surprise, after less than an hour of general discussion, the agency walked away from the table. I fear that this new administration is going to have another class action lawsuit filed in 2017, and it will be a tremendous cost to the taxpayer again. There are 2 indicators that USDA and Forest Service are unwilling to acknowledge the pervasive and endemic discrimination against women and others. First, Chief Tidwell stated twice this year that the female firefighters' discrimination claims are older allegations. These public comments are his continued attempts to minimize the serious civil rights violations and undermine our efforts to have them acknowledged and addressed. These older allegations, to which Chief Tidwell referred, are the women who have been in the EEO system for years because of continued reprisal, refusal to hold repeat offenders, and there are many, accountable, and the agency's refusal to settle EEO complaints. As far as recent issues, last month I was contacted by a female firefighter whose district ranger went on a diatribe to her, and he talked about how smelly and disgusting female firefighters that go on fire assignments get, and that it should be mandatory, that they should be forced to shower daily. The woman was humiliated having to stand there and listen to that. The most recent incident I received was just last week. Another female employee was raped, and she is afraid to come forward. These issues keep me from sleeping at night. When I know that there's a woman out there that is raped, it's hard to sleep, and I wish it was hard for Chief Tidwell to sleep and Secretary Vilsack, because maybe we'd get something done. In conclusion, the question remains, how do we address these problems and where do we start? I propose that in order to effect a real cultural change, there needs to be a commitment from the top for a collaborative effort between the agency, employees, and external organizations. A strategy must be developed with implementation, timeframes, measurements for success, and evaluation. And it should be similar to the Civil Rights Action Team under former Secretary Glickman. It was a great model. The process should be transparent, inclusive, and a focus should be on change and accountability. And above all, congressional oversight is needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Rice, you're now recognized. Please bring that microphone up. There we go. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Chaffetz, and Ranking Member Cummings, and members of the committee. Thank you, and it's an honor to be here. My name is Denise Rice, and I have been in structure.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that the witness please speak into the microphone directly so we can hear her?
My name is Denise Rice, and I have worked both in structured and wildland fire for over 20 years. I truly love my job and the people I work with. In 2011, I reported to my supervisor that I was being sexually harassed by my second-line supervisor. Women are often disregarded, not taken seriously, and passed over. I have personally experienced this. The agency provides protections for its offenders, often promoting them while the victims are shattered, left behind, and nowhere to turn. Women are treated differently in regards to training, assignments, and promotion. Women who report sexual harassment are repeatedly retaliated against. It is your word against theirs. The moment you speak up, you are committing career suicide. Zero tolerance is baloney. The system is rigged against women for reporting sexual harassment and assault. The agency protects the offender. From 2009 to 2011, my second-line supervisor repeatedly sexually harassed me and assaulted me. I filed a complaint, and the instant my life changed. Management removed me of all my supervisory responsibilities, moved me from my location, isolated me to the office of where the perpetrator's friends were and where his wife worked. I never have received a poor evaluation. Numerous investigations were held. There was an OIG investigation with multiple interviews with multiple investigators. I had to relive these incidences over and over and over again. One of the investigators provided graphic details to my peers of what my second-line supervisor had done to me, including the assault. I had lost my reputation, my dignity, when they made my situation public. My family was destroyed. My husband felt helpless because he wasn't allowed to protect me. My life was a living hell. Another example is when the district ranger called an all-hands fire meeting with all my peers in fire to discuss what happened to me and what was happening to the perpetrator and the investigations. I begged them not to make me attend. I was directed to go. And as soon as the district ranger started discussing what happened to me, and people turned and looked at me, I was on display. These were my peers, people I've known for years. I felt responsible, degraded, and I was humiliated. My perception was I was being blamed for the destruction of the fire organization. I quickly left the meeting. Shaking and in tears. There was talk of putting me on AWOL for leaving. I was being attacked by the ones who were supposed to protect me. The agency protected my perpetrator, and while he was under investigation for sexual assault, he continued to supervise women and was allowed to take agency-paid developmental training to promote his career and act as district ranger. This message meant that nothing was wrong, and I was the problem. I kept hearing he's entitled to due process, and this lasted for months. After the investigations were done, they were given to all the district rangers who read all the details and once again, violating my confidentiality, they discussed it, and they determined that he needed to be removed. But before they were going to remove him, the forest supervisor took him out for coffee and advised him of the notice. He retired the next day. And then he was directly hired on a California incident management team, which meant he would be assigned, we could both be assigned to the same fire incident, allowing him to continually work with women. And just this year, they brought him back, fire management brought him back to give a motivational speech to the El Dorado hotshots on my forest. I have since then filed additional reprisal complaints. From working with the Coalition of Minority Employees and being a class action agent for the female firefighter class action, I know what happened to me happens to women all over the region and Forest Service. I don't know of any women who have been able to recover and lead successful careers after filing sexual harassment claims. People need to be held accountable for their actions. Management needs to protect its employees and remove the offenders. Thank you. I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. We'll now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Gowdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Rice, I want to thank you for being here, Ms. Rice, and I want to tell you, I doubt any of the members of this committee that I'm looking at now have any idea what you just described, but we do realize and recognize courage when we see it, and we want to thank you for what we can imagine is an impossibly difficult task. I want to change gears for just a second. You testified early on that you loved your job. I want you to tell the members of the committee what you love most about your job as a firefighter.
Put your, sorry, microphone.
Being in the woods, protecting the forest, fighting fire,
And you've done it for how long?
over 20 years.
All right. To the extent you feel comfortable, can you tell the members of the committee what harassment/abuse you experienced
From the perpetrator or just in general?
from the perpetrator?
He was constantly making comments. He removed me from my office where I had a counterpart to an office back and out of the way where he could come in the office and make comments and approach me. He has, the reason I filed was because I was in his office and we were having an argument and he had taken a letter opener and poked my breasts, both breasts, with a smile on his face in this arrogant way, like he could get away with it. And I just stood there in shock. He has cornered me in the bathroom. He has lifted my shirt up. He has stalked me. I would wait till everybody would leave so I could pull in because I work in the field, and he would be waiting for me. He called me constantly. He interfered with everything. He stalked me.
Ms. Lago, Ms. Rice testified that the details of her complaint were made public. Why would that possibly happen?
Well, it is not permitted. It's the first time that I've heard the details were made public. Per our protocol, only people involved in the investigation.
Listen, I don't want to be rude, but I really don't give a damn about protocol. Do you doubt what Ms. Rice just testified to, that the details of her accusations and allegations were made public?
Well, I'm just saying, I never heard that before now. I'm just
So
saying, in
do
order
you
to answer
doubt it, is my question. Not whether or not you've heard it, do you doubt it?
No, I don't doubt it.
Okay. Well, if it's against protocol, as you say, and you don't doubt that it happened, what have you done about it?
I just heard it I just heard about it.
What are you going to do about it?
I'm going to ask what happened following her investigation, who knew about it, and why.
Well, if memory serves, her perpetrator was allowed to retire. Is that correct? Had you heard that before today?
Yes,
Okay, why? Why was he allowed to retire?
when someone's proposed for removal, they have a right to either retire or resign.
So what consequences would there be for his misconduct if he was allowed to retire?
There could be legal action.
Such as?
He could be sued. He could be,
Privately by her?
yeah.
What did y'all do? You were the employer.
We fired
What did
him.
you do? No, you didn't fire him. He retired. We just established that.
He retired in lieu of being removed from his job.
Well, then why, if there's no difference between retiring and being fired, why didn't you fire him? There must be some benefit to retiring. What is that benefit?
You don't have removal on your record.
So you did confer a benefit to him despite the fact that you don't doubt the allegations that she just made.
We don't have an alternative to fire someone and not offer them retirement.
Well, I just heard the most glowing account of all of the improvements that have been made over the past 8 years. And you mean to tell me that someone can engage in the conduct that Ms. Rice just described and avoid all consequence whatsoever?
Per the federal regulations, yes, someone can retire or resign in lieu of being removed.
Ms. Rice, how long was the investigation ongoing?
At least 6 months.
You testified that you were forced to give multiple accounts of your harassment/abuse.
Correct.
That would be the antithesis to best practices for sex assault victims. So, Ms. Lago, why would victims of sexual harassment or assault be forced to give multiple testimonies or accounts?
At first, the issue was referred to law enforcement. Law enforcement referred it to the IG because of the nature of the offense. I'm not sure how far the IG investigation went, so to answer your question, a reason someone might have to give an account more than once is they might have to speak to an OIG investigator because of their investigation. They might have to speak to law enforcement. And if either of those investigations aren't conclusive, then we do a misconduct investigation.
Do you agree with what Ms. Rice described as a crime?
Yes, I do.
All right, so she would talk to law enforcement first?
She spoke to her supervisor,
Okay.
referred the issue.
Who was the first statement made to?
I don't know.
All right. Well, let me encourage you to do this in the past when y'all are describing the glowing progress that you have made. Making victims give multiple accounts, tell what happened to them multiple times, runs afoul of everything every expert in sex assault and sex harassment cases teach. It runs afoul of all of it. So if you can find a way to limit victims to just having to relive it one time, I would encourage you to do so. And if you can share the regulations that allow someone that commit the conduct that she just described to be conferred the benefit of retirement as opposed to removal, if you could share those regulations with the chairman and the ranking member, I would be most grateful to you.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent that Congresswoman Spear, who previously served on our committee, be allowed to join the committee today and participate in the hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
I also have another unanimous consent requested, a statement from Congressman Donald Connolly be part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
Just want to engage in a brief colloquy with you. Mr. Chairman, the committee has received statements from a number of whistleblowers regarding the EEO program in the Department of Agriculture, including from the following individuals: Nadine Chapman, Gail Peterson, Akio Watson, and Tori Jones. These individuals have raised serious concerns about the management of the EEO program. In many cases, they allege that their own EEO complaints have been handled improperly. I know staff have received these, and I believe your staff have received them as well. I know you share my concern about these allegations, and I hope we can work together to review these allegations, investigate them, and take action in a bipartisan way.
Absolutely. Again, I appreciate the ranking member's passion and commitment, and we will continue to work together and to pursue that and to make sure that those people who have stepped forward and shared this information are properly protected under the Whistleblower Act. So absolutely.
One other thing, I ask unanimous consent to place into the record an article entitled "Out Here, No One Can Hear You Scream," March 16, 2016, Huffington Post article.
Without objection, so ordered.
I want to pick up, thank you very much. Ms. Largo, I want to pick up where Mr. Gowdy left off, because you said something that really concerns me, and I know that it will concern him too. We have this article that appeared in the Huffington Post, and it appeared, this apparently was this is a scathing article about your department, about agriculture, and it details Ms. Rice's case. I mean, it's public right here. It even has a picture of her in it. When did you come on board?
In August of 2011.
Well, you just said that you didn't even know about it. I can't imagine that somebody could have an article, it's about 16, 17 pages, and it's got this picture of her, and it describes her situation in detail, but you just said, sitting here at the table today, you just realized that it had been made public. You didn't read this article?
If I may clarify, what I said I didn't know about was that her
You said you didn't know it had gone.
shared with district rangers. I wasn't aware of that. I was aware of this case.
And that this had been public, made public. I think I'm following up on what Mr. Gowdy said. I mean, if you had asked her that, I'd yield to the gentleman, that you'd asked her about, she had said to you that this was the first time that she knew about it, right?
I think the gentleman's recollection is correct. I was trying to establish that she had to give multiple accounts of what had happened to her, that the perpetrator was allowed to retire instead of be disciplined, and I was trying to get a better understanding of why that could have happened and what she knew and when she knew it, Mr. Cummings.
Thank you very much. Now, let me, it just concerns me that you sound like you didn't know about that, because I think that if you were anywhere else in one of our offices and something had been written about our office, and you were a major employee in there, and this was your purview, you know, it would just bother me that you would be just finding out of it. But be that as it may. Dr. Leonard, last year, the Office of Special Counsel sent a letter to the President of the United States. It warned that the USDA Civil Rights Program, and I quote, has been seriously mismanaged, thereby compromising the civil rights of USDA employees. When you see a letter like that, alarm bells should go off. Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
I can't hear you.
Sir.
You said yes, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You claim that significant improvements have been made, but your claim is hard to reconcile with the approach your department took in response to my request in January. For example, in my letter, I asked for copies of external reviews of USDA's EEO's program. I asked for these external reviews because the USDA claimed in its 2014 report on its EEO program that, and I quote, the success of USDA's recent efforts to confront the history of civil rights abuses has been recognized and verified by a host of internal and external parties and metrics, end of quote. That's what USDA said. You touted these external reviews in your 2014 report. So why hasn't the department provided these external reviews that I asked for 11 months ago? I mean, it seemed like that would be something that you would get to me very quickly, since it's something that is supposed to be complimentary. Help me with
Congressman Cummings, it's, I want to apologize firstly for not being able to provide the documents to you. As Ms. Rice said, there are a number of confidentiality requirements. I did not find out until a conference call I was on with your staff on Monday that some of those documents were not provided. Because even in that conference call, I told your staff, we gave them the information. We gave them the information. It wasn't until after the fact that I found out that persons came here and read it to you and didn't give it to you. I collected the information so you would have it. So I do want to apologize about the miscommunication between our staff and your staff. And I do look forward to getting you some of the additional information. We
So when will
got
the
some to
documents be
you.
produced? I guess that's the
The
question.
documents are produced in-house. They're internal
When
documents.
when will we have them?
I will have to talk to OGC and try to get them as soon as possible to you. As you know, before we can hand anything over, it goes to my
Again, keep in mind, I
my
asked for this
statement today went to OMB, OGC,
11 months ago.
OBPA, and I apologize.
Can you
Again,
give me some kind of time thing? Because I can't, man, time is short.
2 weeks.
All right, thank you. 2 weeks. I just have just a few more things. Dr. Leonard, OSC wrote to the President that your office, the Office of the Assistant Secretary of Civil Rights, and I quote, has an unusually high number of complaints filed against its own leadership. We asked for information about these complaints during the last meeting with my staff. Your staff read aloud some vague and cursory information about a dozen cases filed against senior officials. But your staff refused to provide the document they were reading from. Instead, they said that they had a car. I mean, you can't make this up. Instead, they said they had a car waiting outside and had to rush out. It wasn't until 7 p.m. last night on the eve of this hearing that we finally received the written summary document. Why did that happen? Help me with that.
As you know, Mr. Ranking Member Cummings, I didn't attend that meeting. I don't know anything about a car. I provided the documents to the staff that came here, and my assumption was they were providing them to you. I found out, again, they read the documents to you, and then I did hear about the car incident, and then they ran off. I was shocked to hear about this on Monday. That's why I wanted to make sure I got the information to you, and that is the information that you wanted, sadly, 6 to 7 months ago, that you received on the eve of this.
Just one other thing. Dr. Leonard, my goal has always been to try to be as effective and efficient as possible and make sure that EEO operates in that way. Will you commit to providing everything I requested in my letter in January and everything the chairman and I requested in our subsequent letter within the next 2 weeks?
Yes, sir.
And finally, Ms. Donnelly, in my last minute, I want to discuss just one key issue. In your experience, is the department's handling, I sat here and as I listened to you, to Ms. Lago, and I listened to you, it sounded like we're talking about two different worlds. I mean, it's like night and day. And I've never seen testimony so far apart. And so, in your experience, is the department's handling of EEO cases improving or declining? And what has been the experience of the members of your organization?
In our experience, it's declining. And it's declining in just about every facet of the EEO process. It starts when an employee calls to file an EEO complaint. And keep in mind, employees really know nothing about the process. When you're a firefighter, you know about fighting fire, you don't know about the EEO system. So they have to have some faith that they're going to be treated correctly when they file a complaint and given correct information. Employees will call. They won't get calls back from the EEO intake person. EEO counselors will tell them they don't have a case when they do, because they'll call me and tell me that, and I'll look at what happened, and I'll go, well, they shouldn't have told you that. Then when they get into the formal process, they wait months for an investigation. The investigators come. I don't know how they train the investigators, but some of these investigations are so poorly done that you can't make heads or tails of what is being said in the report, which is critical for the employee. And I've made numerous complaints to Eric Adelano and Robert Shin about they lose reports of investigations and they don't send them to us. They miss dates. They will send in address changes, and they don't put the address change in the database, and then the employee doesn't get this, the stuff goes to their old address. It's numerous problems. And then as you go further and get towards the hearing, it's just delay, delay, delay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Let's recognize the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donnelly, clarification, you filed your suit. Yeah, I'm a freshman. I sit way down here. You filed your suit in 2000, is that correct?
I filed Donnelly v. Glickman as a lawsuit in 1995.
But in 2002, there were 190 complaints in California, more than any other region. That's Region 5, is that correct?
That's correct.
So after you filed the complaint, 7 years later, we had still a major problem in that region. That's correct.
Yes, that is correct.
And then 10 years later, we've still got the same problem in the same region.
Yes, we do. Still has the highest number of complaints.
Ms. Rice, you were employed in Region 5, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Ms. Lago, following up on Mr. Gowdy and Ranking Member Cummings' comments, I don't believe you. When you said you didn't know about this, I also have a copy of this article from the Huffington Post. Out here, no one can hear you scream. It's amazing to me that this has been going on so long, and it's escalating. It's not getting better. How do you respond to that? And would you answer truthfully?
Thank you. I'd like to clarify, I did not intend to say that I didn't know about this. I do know about this. I thought the gentleman was asking me, did I know that her investigation had been shared with district rangers. That is what I was saying I didn't know about. Yes, I knew about this case.
Does the name Cheyenne Zidslow, do you know that name?
No, I don't.
About Dave Loeffler?
Say that again, please.
Dave Loeffler?
No, I don't know that name.
About Alicia Dabney
Yes, I know that name.
and Chile Kearney?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Chile Kearney?
No, I don't know that name.
Mike Harris?
No, I don't know that.
They're all in this article.
They don't all work for the Forest Service.
It's all part of the pattern, though, that's going on with sexual harassment. And apparently throughout various agencies of the United States government, I can't remember how many times we've had hearings discussing this. And then in regard to Ms. Rice and reading what is in the article, listening to her testimony, I mean, the guy Beckett wasn't fired, was he?
As per federal law, he was allowed to retire
You know what?
when he was proposed for removal.
That sounds suspiciously like your protocol answer to Mr. Gowdy, and I associate myself with his response in that regard. The guy not only should have been fired, he should have been arrested. And I don't understand why this continues to go on. The Park Service, the Forest Service, I mean, isn't it your job to investigate these things and Mr. Leonard, I mean, what are you guys doing about this?
I would say that things have improved a lot, going back to my original statement.
How can you say that
Prior
though,
to
when
2000
you've got Region 5
In
that has this
1999,
record?
in 1999, the United States Department of Agriculture, there were around 1,000 complaints a year. Last year we had, last year we had 540. In the middle 2000s, there were around 2005, 2006, 2007, there were around 750 complaints a year. Since 2000, when this administration came in, we haven't had over 540 complaints. From 2001 to 2008, the United States Department of Agriculture had 12 EEO findings from 2001 to 2008. From 2009 to 2016, we've had 127 findings. From 2000, let me get this right, because the Secretary constructed blueprint. At one time, from 2000 to 2010, my office would intake the EEO complaints, and then we would give them back to the agency to do investigation. We were 31% timely in those years. We were not timely and potentially subject to sanction. Secretary gave our office even more responsibility for two parts. One, he didn't like the idea of when someone files a complaint, then the office that it's filed is investigating the complaint. So it came to the department. Since that time, we went from 31% timely on our EEO investigations to last year 59%, but we've had a high of 74 and 65 and 63 in the last 4 years. Our processes are improving. We've made generational change in the last 7 years, I promise you. In addition to the settling of the class action suits, in addition to knocking down farmer complaints from 100 to 30, I think it was 41 this year. In addition, so I can give you a lot of instances, and I would say this in the last.
Why don't you provide that in writing to the committee? I want to wrap up my period of questions here, and I appreciate your response to that. My problem with it is that we've had people in here from the EPA, we've had people in here from other agencies. I know this is not the Forest Service, but it seems to be a culture within federal agencies. We keep having these hearings, Mr. Chairman, and today, I think, tops them all, from what I heard from Mrs. Rice's testimony, from what's in this article, and the fact that Ms. Lago doesn't recognize some of the names from some of these other people. This is a cultural problem, and as much attention has been given to this, particularly by this committee, for us to have to keep bringing this up, that just defies common sense for me. This is something that, in this day and time, there shouldn't be any complaints. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I'm going to recognize myself. We would normally go to the Democratic side, and we've UC'd Ms. Spear, but per the rules of the committee, we go through the members who are on the committee first before we go to those that have been UC'd on. I want to follow up here. Ms. Lago, what about, you said you, quote, hold people accountable, end quote. How long have you been in your current position?
Since August of 2011.
And how many people since that time have been fired?
In the last year, 200 people were fired. The year before that, 115.
And how many for sexual harassment?
In the last 3 years,
Whatever
70
time frame.
people. 70 people have been disciplined for sexual misconduct. 30 have been fired or removed.
Would that, when you say or removed, when you say removed, does that include those that would just retire or quit?
Retire or resign, yes.
So
7 were.
Following up with us, I don't expect you to memorize all this off the top of your head. I need you to detail that for us with specificity. Don't break it into, you can't say fired or just retired. I want to see the difference between the two. Because the concern is that you don't actually fire somebody. They get their full benefits, they get everything else. Now, this person in Ms. Rice's case, why was he hired to come in and provide a motivational speech?
So I was very disturbed to learn that as well. I found out about that last week. What I understand is he encountered the existing hotshot superintendent at an off-forest event for retirees or a going-away party or something like that. The current superintendent invited him to a gathering. It's not clear that that superintendent knew the history I'm not sure. When the forest supervisor found out after the event where Mr. Beckett appeared, he sat down all of his staff and said, we can't ever have this guy anywhere at any of our functions.
And that's one of the consequences of not having a disciplinary action, right? Just allowing him, patting him on the back, saying, you know, good job. How much did you pay him? How much did the taxpayers pay this guy?
He wasn't paid to appear there.
Still, the motivational speech, he just did it out of the goodness of his heart, it was just free?
That's correct.
There's no paid compensation?
Yes, sir, no pay.
Ms. Rice, can you shine and illuminate any, based on what you just said, what's your perspective of this?
The superintendent did know Beckett, knew him, worked for him for many years, knew of the incident.
Give me some more details of this. He worked for him and he knew of the incident. Why would he have known of the incident?
Because the entire forest knew. They had a all-hands meeting with all the people from fire. He was one of the attendees.
The one that was detailed in the article that Ms. Lago says she never read? That article?
The current superintendent for the hotshots used to work for Beckett and was there when I was being harassed. He was there, and then he was also there during the investigations. He was very aware of what happened to me.
Ms. Lago,
Here's-
do you dispute what Ms. Rice is saying?
No, I don't.
So what are you doing about it?
So what we're doing is the forest supervisor instructed his staff never to let that happen again.
Is he going to get a bonus?
He whom,
The person who brought in the person who had committed this atrocity against Ms. Rice. There's somebody who had to actually approve this and set it up, right? That person, what are you going to do? What's the repercussion to him or her? Who is that person?
I'll undertake a misconduct investigation on the actions of that person.
And you'll get back to us on what
Yes.
the ramifications are?
Yes, I will.
Explain to me why it takes so long to go through these harassment issues. 4 years, said was the average time that it took? And that's been improved to 18 months?
That's the program. That's the program. If it was a farm complaint, that would be the farm side, the program side.
I'd like to learn more about this. My time is very short. I want to go, this is, we have had a lot of interaction with Carolyn Lerner. She is the Office of the Special Counsel. She issued this report on a letter to the President on May 18th of 2015. Ms. Lago and Mr. Leonard, I'd like you to respond to that. Do you dispute anything in her findings?
I do.
And what do you dispute in her findings?
For the Office of Special Counsel, as you know, has so much power. It could have had an order of relief, demanding my office take action right away. It could have even had a recommendation, but it had exactly what it said. It said, make them whole. It didn't provide the direction. When I provided the information to
Okay, well, let me...
when I provided the information yesterday, the majority of, and it's important to say alleged discrimination here and there, the alleged, the information, when people, I do this all the time.
That's not what it says, sir. It's not what it says.
It doesn't have an order
I'll
of
read it
relief.
to you. I'll read it to you. I'll read it to you, okay? The proposed corrective actions do not provide sufficient redress for affected individuals. It doesn't say anything in that sentence about alleged or anything else. Let me read the paragraph right before it, because it's section 4, and with the indulgence of the committee here, I'm going to just read this. I have reviewed the original disclosure, the agency reports, the whistleblower comments. I have determined that the reports contain all the information required by statute. However, the agency's findings are partially unreasonable. As the whistleblowers noted, the Office of the one that you oversee, is tasked with protecting civil rights of all USDA employees. As such, this office should set the standard not only for processing claims, but also for creating an environment free of discrimination. Rather than leading this effort, the report confirms that your office, Mr. Leonard, has had an unusual high number of complaints filed against its own leadership. In addition, almost half of these complaints were not acted on in a timely manner. And even when they were addressed within the legally mandated period, they were processed in a manner that violated agency regulations. While the report did not reveal any intentional wrongdoing, it demonstrated that OASCR has been seriously mismanaged, therefore compromising the civil rights of the USDA employees. Given the seriousness of these concerns, the corrective actions appear to only partially resolve the identified wrongdoing. While they adequately address the management and conduct of OASCR going forward, the proposed corrective actions do not provide sufficient redress for affected individuals. We also have the number of EEO complaints filed against USDA senior manager headquarters going from roughly 1 in 2011 to 24 in 2014. With 0 findings of discrimination. In fact, over 2011 to 2015, 42 complaints filed, 0 findings of discrimination.
Against senior management officials
Yeah.
at USDA.
So going back to the special counsel's letter, detail for us where they're wrong.
But firstly, that's just not my office. That's all of USDA and 100,000
Understood,
employees.
understood, in the context of it, but
In my office, it was 12 for a 5-year period, and we have 140 employees.
that's a
13.
lot, that's a lot. 10%?
The majority of complaints that are on senior leaders in my staff are chain of command complaints.
You don't think that's a lot, sir?
The majority of the complaints are chain of command and complaints, so they're coming 6 down. So if you don't get a QSI and you want your QSI, you'll put it on the person on top of you, the other one, I'm 5 people removed,
Yeah,
but I'm still in that number.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to explain the numbers to you.
We have an independent person, the Office of Special Counsel, who sends just a handful of letters to the President, and she sends one and comes to the finding. I want you to explain to us
She
why
came-
you think she's wrong.
She came with the finding.
Yes, I just read it to you.
In my world, there's a finding or a non-finding. A finding would have an order of relief attached to it. I mean, in order, if there's a finding on the Forest Service, I'm ordering them to put civil rights placards up. I'm ordering people to go to civil rights trainings. I'm ordering
I'm asking you
removal. I'm ordering, there is.
I'm trying to lessen my time here. I'm trying to ask you, in this multi-page letter, where you think she's wrong. Tell me what you dispute.
I will tell you this. Our Office of Inspector General did the investigation of that. And there are going to be a few people who will come to you and say, I agree 100% with the Office of Inspector General report.
I'm not
I
talking
agree with it, but the OSC
Mr.
report
Leonard,
was
Mr.
taken
Leonard,
from
you're not
the OIG
getting, Mr. Leonard,
investigation.
Mr. Leonard, stop.
The OSC report.
Mr. Leonard, I want you to stop. I'm not talking about the Inspector General. I'm talking about the Office of Special Counsel, who sent a letter to the President of the United States. That is not a common occurrence. It happened more than a year ago. I'm asking you, giving you the opportunity for you to tell me where you think she's wrong.
I agree with the Inspector General report that did the investigation. I have concerns with the interpretation of said report.
Okay, we'll revisit this. I've gone way past my time. I believe it's Mr. Heiss of Georgia, and I recognize for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lago, let me get a few of these numbers right in my mind again. I know you've stated it, so forgive me for repeating this, but how many Forest Service employees have been terminated the past year for sexual harassment?
In the last year, 17.
17.
For sexual misconduct, to be clear, it isn't always sexual harassment. They may not have harassed someone else, but they conducted themselves.
How many have been terminated for sexual harassment?
I'll have to come back to you with that number.
Okay, and you have mentioned a couple of times, as per federal law, a person has a choice between being removed from office or retiring.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So why would they have a choice when we're dealing with sexual harassment? Why would you permit them to have a choice for retirement with full benefits as opposed to removing them from office? Why did they get the choice?
Well, sir, I'm not sure how to explain it, but per federal law, the procedures for removing a federal employee provide them the opportunity.
Is there any behavior that an individual could commit whereby they are not allowed a choice as per federal law? Is there any behavior whereby you would remove them from office and they would not even have a choice of retirement?
I'm not totally sure about that. I'd like to get back to you.
So you are saying then, is this your testimony, that based on federal law, that an employee can commit any crime or do any kind of behavior they want to and find protection under federal law to keep their job or to keep their benefits when they retire?
I'm aware that we have removed people while they were incarcerated, awaiting trial, that kind of thing, and I don't believe we gave those people the option, but I'm not sure the statute or the regulation under which we were able to do that.
Don't you think it'd be kind of wise for you to know the boundaries within which you're able to walk as it relates to people who are committing crimes, who are committing sexual harassment, and you don't even know the law, you don't even know the boundaries whereby you have authorization to remove them from office? Don't you think that's kind of important for you to know?
Yes, that's important.
Well, then why don't you? This is not new. You are not just finding out about these cases now. You've known about these cases for a long time by your own testimony. And yet here you sit before us today and say that you still don't even know the law as to what your rights are to remove people from office?
I'm not sure the specific authority by which we can remove people without providing them the option to retire.
You've
or
stated that.
resign.
My comeback is that is inexcusable for you to be in a position such as you're in and not even know the authority. You are allowing people to commit crimes and not removing them from office, allowing them to retire and get full benefit, and you can't even describe for this committee what possible behavior a person would have to commit in order for them to be removed from office. I find that inexcusable. Now, what about discipline? You've mentioned, how many have been disciplined?
This year, in total, 600 people in 2016.
What kind of disciplinary action has been taken?
We've removed people, we've suspended people, we've demoted people, there have been letters.
You've removed them, you've just reassigned them. Is that what you mean?
We've removed, as in they don't work here anymore, 200 people.
I thought you just said you couldn't remove them.
No, I didn't say that.
You did say that. All right, let's go back to disciplinary action. What does disciplinary action look like? Are these people getting a slap on the wrist?
As I mentioned, 200 were removed. Some number get suspensions, some number get demotions, some people get letters of reprimand and warning. It depends on the offense.
And some people get promotions. We've already seen that today, too. Is that considered a disciplinary action for people to receive promotions for their criminal behavior?
People don't get promotions for their criminal behavior.
Well, it's happened, as has even been described here today. Mr. Chairman, I find this absolutely offensive to sit through this whole thing and to hear the incompetence that's occurring in high-level positions. And with that, sir, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. We're going to recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to say there's some inconsistency, Ms. Lago, with your answers to Mr. Heiss's questions. He was asking why people were given the option to retire instead of being fired, and you said, well, we don't know how to get rid of them, so we have to retire them. Then later on, you said, we fired about 200 people. So I'm just curious, why, if you had the ability to remove them, why didn't you remove them? Can you explain that?
I will explain that. If we have the ability to remove them and don't have to offer them the opportunity to retire or resign, we would do that. Some people don't exercise their option to retire or resign, and we remove them.
But under Title V, you can remove people for this type of conduct. You know that, right? Have you explored your legal rights in terms of terminating their retirement for sexual harassment?
I haven't personally, no.
Well, it would seem that someone in your situation, what's going on in this department, that you should have a long time ago, if you were really interested in serious discipline, you would know to the letter what your rights were if you wanted to remove someone. So I don't think you've given it serious thought, nor do I believe that you've gone back to your legal counsel and got a solid foundation in terms of what your options are. And I suggest you need to do that. Mr. Leonard, when the Office of, I want to go back to the Chairman's line of questioning, when the Office of Special Counsel wrote its warning letter to President Obama, which is a serious and unusual occurrence, it said this about your office, the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights, and I quote here, "A large number of EEO complaints had not been acted on in a timely manner. The investigation revealed that from November 2009 through September 2014, OSCR received 231 complaints filed against senior USDA managers, including 13 filed against Ms. Scott or other OSCR officials. Overall, 112 of these complaints, including at least 5 filed against Ms. Scott or another OSCR official, were not investigated and reported on within the 180-day time limit established by law." So we have 112 complaints. That's close quote. So 112 complaints that were not investigated within the 180-day time period. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
All right. How many of those 112 complaints have been closed since the time of this letter that went to President Obama?
I believe since the time of the letter, the actual number grew to 120. I believe there are only 3 open at present.
So they've all been closed except for 3?
Except for 3.
Okay.
And
what
two of those are...
What does close mean? Was there a decision on the merits in those cases?
There were 34 of them that were settled. There were decisions on the merits on everything else, either EEOC or final agency decision that we did.
So every single case except for 3?
Except for 3. Except for 3.
Okay.
It's important to realize that in the I removed 3 managers, GS-15s, from the positions that weren't getting the job done. I removed 3 managers. I removed the vendor that we're utilizing because there seemed to be gaps in cases. Since 2014, we've been 100% accurate. For fiscal year 14, fiscal year 15, fiscal year 16, we've been 100% accurate. Once we made these changes in personnel and vendors, we in the last 3 years, we've been 100% accurate, and we're 100% accurate in the beginning of 2017.
Okay. What steps has the Department made or taken to make individuals whole by improper delays in their cases lingering for such a long time?
If it was merited, we settled 34 of those cases.
Okay.
If many of them didn't have strong merit because the alleged discrimination, there wasn't strong merit, it went the usual route of either having a finding or going to EEOC. But if we had merit of the 120 cases, 34 of them, we took it upon ourselves to encourage the agencies. Those 120 cases are all the 18 departments and 17 staff offices of USDA. So we took it upon ourselves that we said that these have merit your individual agency and/or staff office needs to attempt to settle.
Okay. I'm going over my time, but in closing, I just want to say that the number of cases, the volume of cases here in this one department indicates a culture. And I just hope you're doing everything possible to eradicate that culture so that other employees aren't similarly aggrieved. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now go to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Grothman, for 5 minutes.
Ms. Donnelly, you've been testifying before this committee for apparently quite a while. And I know you were before this committee in 2008 when maybe many of us weren't around. Could you let us know whether you feel there's been improvement over the last 8 years? You could compare the current environment at the Forest Service today compared to 8 years ago?
I wish I could say there was improvement. One thing that had improved, and I can't. Things have gotten worse in terms of the blatant harassment against women, minorities, people with disabilities, the complete disengagement of Secretary Vilsack and Chief Tidwell and Dr. Leonard from working with the coalition and other groups to try to resolve these issues. In the previous administration, we had access to the secretary meetings, access to the chief. We were invited to the White House, and there was more of a collaborative effort. And in the last 8 years, there's been virtually no response to our requests. And our request has been very simple. It's to merely sit down and start talking, have a dialogue to talk about the issues and exchange ideas and move towards resolution. And Secretary Vilsack and Dr. Leonard and Chief Tidwell have absolutely not wanted to do that. And the conditions for employees have worsened.
Wow. So under current Ag Secretary under the Obama administration, as bad as things were in 2008, things have gotten even worse, even more callous, even more who cares?
That's correct. I've actually seen an increase in women reporting rape. Now, the agency won't tell you that, but women are afraid to come forward and report it. They won't even report it to the police because they don't want the agency to know. Because, again, I refer back to Alicia Dabney. When she reported these things, the agency trumped her up on false charges and terminated her. And they did it publicly so other women employees could see the chilling effect it would have for a woman to come forward. And people have children, they have mortgages, and women will suffer in silence rather than lose their job. It's a disgrace.
I'm going to switch aside just to one other question, then I'm going to come back to you. This question can be, I guess, for whoever feels qualified to ask it. We always get a variety of information before these hearings. I noticed here there was a consent decree under a 40-year-old case now, Bernardi versus Madigan. Is that consent decree still in, if you guys are familiar with it, is that still in effect?
No, it isn't.
Okay, okay. Ms. Donnelly, can you give us some more? I mean, this Beckett thing is just almost unbelievable. I mean, just when you think the government couldn't get any worse, they get worse. But could you give me some other examples of cases that you'd like to tell this committee?
Yes, I do have many. And one thing I would like to make really clear to the committee that hasn't been brought out very clearly, when Mr. Beckett was brought back this year to be a motivational speaker, it wasn't the first time the agency did that after he retired. Very shortly after he retired, the agency let him come back, be hired on an incident management team that goes out to fire assignments across the nation. And we found that out. It was done very sneakily, and we found that out, and Ms. Rice was very concerned because she would possibly unknowingly run into him on a fire assignment. And it took us a lot of work to get the agency to take him off that team.
So you got back on the payroll again? again?
Yes.
What you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. And the agency supported it until we really fought to get him off that team. So bringing him back as a motivational speaker was the second time.
Okay. Ms. Lago, you made a point of saying that when he came back as a motivational speaker, he wasn't paid, and even then that was not appropriate. Do you agree, though, that he was also brought back as a paid employee for a while and could have wound up working with Ms. Rice?
Thank you for the opportunity to respond. In fact, he was picked up on a California contract crew, and he appeared on one of our fires. And Ms. Donnelly helpfully raised that to our attention, and we immediately intervened to get him, his contract crew, off our fire and to put direction out that he should never be allowed to be contracted with, appear on our fire, et cetera.
Ms. Rice, it looks like you have something to say. Do you?
I disagree. He was picked up on a team with the agency.
Okay.
I disagree.
He was working.
He wasn't on a contract crew. He didn't have a contract crew.
Okay. Well, we're not going to be able to settle that today, but obviously I wish you'd be able to get to the bottom of that. Ms. Rice, you're pretty confident that he was working for the Forest Service again?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't we track down the answer to that?
And if the gentleman yield, do you have, how long, what was the time span? So he leaves the one position, how long before he's back on a crew?
A month?
About a month later?
2 months?
And then how long did he serve in that role? Do you have any idea?
I don't think it was very long, a couple months.
Okay. Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Let's recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me thank the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Donnelly and Ms. Rice, I would like to thank you for your courageous testimony today. I know it must be very difficult for you to revisit your experiences in such a public setting, and we appreciate you coming forward. There is a history of discrimination and harassment of female firefighters in the Forest Service, spanning more than 4 decades. Ms. Rice, let me begin by asking you about the events leading up to your decision to file an EEO complaint in 2011, in as much detail as you feel comfortable providing. Can you describe what you endured?
It started off with just the sexual innuendos, and it escalated to touching me and cornering me and trying to be inappropriate with me. He had me removed from the office to this other office where he could come and go as he pleased and nobody would see him. I had even quit announcing myself on the radio to avoid running into him because he would show up at my location.
And what made you finally want to come forward?
This had been going on for a couple of years, and I was breaking down. I couldn't take it anymore.
And in your written testimony for today's hearing, you state, and I quote, "Women who report sexual harassment or retaliated against, it is your word against his, and you know the moment you open your mouth to speak up, you are committing career suicide." Can you elaborate on this statement? What retaliation did you experience after reporting?
The way they handled my case, it was everything was done wrong. I was the bad guy. They protected him. You know,
And Ms. Lago, how do you respond to Ms. Rice's deeply troubling statement that reporting harassment is tantamount to committing career suicide, and to the allegations of retaliations she has expressed?
Well, I think what she experienced was horrifying, and I think the actions of Mr. Beckett are unforgivable. I think anybody that goes through that, it's horrifying and unacceptable. As far as retaliation, we don't condone, tolerate, accept retaliation. We have procedures when people report retaliation, but what we struggle with is there's fear of retaliation. People fear reprisal, so that fear suppresses people coming forward. It makes it difficult for us to take action, to demonstrate our commitment.
Well, and here, to me, it sounds as though if this has been going on for 4 decades in this service, then there is a problem with the culture of the fire service. So how do we attack and change the culture of men feeling they can dominate women? What is this all about?
Sure, thank you. So I think there are 2 things that we have underway that are going to be helpful in this culture change, because as you mentioned, it's long-term, it's long-standing, and it takes time to turn it around. So the couple of things that I'm thinking of is we have workshops and skill building and team building for women in fire programs across the country. So that's one thing. And the second thing is our efforts to include more women and minorities in our fire jobs. We just had the number one way people come into the fire job is through our apprentice academy. And for example, in the most recent advertisement, there wasn't enough diversity in the applicant pool. So Regional Forester Randy Moore canceled the advertisement and is rerunning it, and he asked to get more outreach.
What about more severe action and requiring that some of these heads roll, that people be fired actually for their actions on the job? Any movement towards that?
You know, my boss, the chief, says, you know, if you get a chance to ask the committee, ask them to help us make it easier to fire people. So we have a code, a penalty guide. We use that for our guidance, and yeah, we would like to fire people.
It shouldn't be too difficult with people conducting themselves in that manner where they are harassing and overtly harming their coworkers. It shouldn't be that hard.
Thank the
My
gentleman.
time's up.
We're very pleased to have Ms. Spear, who's joined us. She was a full member of this committee, and we wish she still was, quite frankly, but we're glad that she's joined us today. We asked for unanimous consent that she join the committee, which we have already done, and so we're pleased that you're here, and now recognize Ms. Spear for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I would love to be able to join this committee again. I truly enjoyed the time I spent here. And I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing, because this issue is a very, very serious one. You know, I'd like to paraphrase Shakespeare and say there is something rotten in the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Forest Service. This has been going on for 40 years. And lawsuits are filed. They are settled. There are consent decrees that go on for a period of years, and then the behavior reoccurs again and again and again. Now, I sent a letter with a number of my colleagues to the USDA OIG in 2014, asking the IG to look into the allegations of sexual harassment. And the IG from the U.S. Department of Agriculture wrote back and said, we're not going to do this investigation. They're working hard on it. Things will improve. And then more recently, Mr. Chairman, you and many others from the Senate and the House, bipartisan, have sent yet another letter, and it appears that there may be an investigation. Ms. Lago, you met with me at one point, and if I remember correctly, we had asked that you do a climate survey, and you said you were going to do one, but you were going to require that people identify themselves. And I said, well, that was pretty outrageous, that you're not going to get accurate information by doing that. And then you chose rightfully to make it anonymous. But in that conversation that we had, you said something to the effect that, boys will be boys, that the environment is such that you can't trust what goes on in the backwoods, and you can't really trust what people say. Do you remember that conversation?
I'm certain I never said boys will be boys.
Well, maybe I'm paraphrasing it, but you said, when you have an environment like this and they're in the backcountry, these kinds of things happen.
Well, I'm not sure what I said.
Well, let me ask you this. You made reference to the fact that you're not sure you can trust everything that's said. Do you believe what Ms. Donnelly and Ms. Rice have attested to?
I believe what Ms. Rice has attested to. I don't believe that all of what Ms. Donnelly has attested to is accurate.
Did you all stand and raise your right hands and swear under oath when you came in this morning?
Yes, we did.
So you believe that she swore under oath and she's still not telling the truth?
I said I didn't think it was accurate.
Well, you're mincing words here. Either you believe her or you don't.
Well, you can be factually incorrect and think you're telling the truth.
So you think she's factually incorrect?
That's right.
All right, let me ask you about Mr. Beckett. Everyone seems just shocked that he was rehired in any capacity.
I agree.
What have you done to the person who rehired him? Have there been any personnel actions taken against that individual? Have you even looked into it?
Yes, that was 2011 or 12, but my understanding was he was hired on an interagency crew, not a Forest Service crew, as a contractor. We took action to get that contractor off our fire.
All right, you know what I'd like for you to do, and if the committee would so allow, I'd like to have you show us documentation of that, because there appears to be some dispute as to whether he was a contract employee or not. We should see that. And even if he was hired as a contract employee on an interagency, someone had to know that he was being brought back. Someone had to make the decision to have him come back as a motivational speaker, whether he was being paid or not. And frankly, that has really nothing to do with it, because it's sending a huge message to everybody that even though this individual has been terminated, even though he has been found to have conducted himself inappropriately, we're bringing him back as a motivational speaker. So everyone, shut up. Now, let me move to retaliation. In the ICF report, it makes it very clear that there were systematic differences in the survey responses between female and male perceptions of the workplace. Women provided consistently less favorable responses than men. My time is almost up. What are you doing to address the fact that women in the Forest Service feel that they are retaliated against and that the environment is hostile?
Yes, thank you. So since that survey, we've added a position in the regional office who is sort of an ombudsman for work environment, who works directly with all of the forests. We've dispatched civil rights teams who meet with who travel with OGC attorneys to meet with forests, to have groups talking about our anti-harassment training, appropriate conduct in the workplace. We're hosting focus groups around retaliation because, again, it's a fear of reprisal, and if people don't come forward and describe their experience, we don't have the opportunity to follow up on it. So we're piloting those focus groups in several of the forests.
Mr. Chairman, my time has expired, but let me just finally say that the way that you make sure that there's not reprisals, the way you make sure that people do not feel fearful in terms of reporting is to enforce the law and take action against the perpetrators. I yield back.
I thank the gentlewoman. Does any other member have any additional questions? The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure that I understood your answer to one of my questions correctly, Ms. Lago. I ask you, do you recognize the name Alicia Dabney?
My answer was yes.
Okay. And Alicia Dabney alleged that an attempted rape occurred, that she was put in a chokehold and the guy attempted to rape her. Was there a criminal investigation into that?
Not that I know of,
Why not?
because she did not make that allegation in her misconduct investigation inquiry.
That was also mentioned in Congresswoman Spears' letter. Was anyone fired?
In events associated with Ms. Dabney, yes.
The perpetrator was fired? Who was
Unrelated to the allegation of rape, yes, someone was.
fired? Was the perpetrator, though, the person who did this was fired, but it had nothing to do with the alleged attack on Ms. Dabney?
That's correct. It was a different event.
And wasn't Ms. Dabney fired later?
She resigned.
That's in conflict with one of the documents that I have. I'd like for you to look into that and give clarification.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We'll recognize Mr. Grothman of Wisconsin.
Yeah, a couple more questions for Ms. Lago. That Bernardi versus Madigan consent decree apparently expired, or it was no longer in effect around 2005, 2006, correct? Is that what?
I think it was sooner than that.
Sooner than
I think
that?
it was in the 90s.
In the 90s, okay. And I think at the time, what your goal was to get 43% women in every position.
In California.
Yeah, and after it expired, do you still have similar goals, or could you comment on?
Sure. So currently in the Forest Service, about 35% of the workforce are female. That's been consistent over the last several years. In California, it's slightly less. I think it's 32%. So we're not at 43%. And the reasons for that are complicated, or complex, I guess I should say. So what has changed since the 90s is the workforce in California is a much higher percentage of firefighter than it used to be. We've probably doubled the number of firefighters in California, while the total workforce has stayed the same or declined. So there's a greater percentage. When you look at the civilian labor force and look at the firefighter occupation, between 4 and 5% of firefighters are women, compared to about 12% are women firefighters in the Forest Service. It's hard to reach that 43% parity with the civilian labor force with the proportion of firefighters that we have, but we are implementing strategies to increase our outreach and hiring for women.
You are doing what you can to promote women and that sort of thing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. We'll recognize Mr. Cummings.
Just very quickly, Dr. Leonard, OSC wrote its letter to President in 2015. And when did you first become aware that a majority of the complaints filed against the senior managers were not being acted on in a timely manner?
Probably
I can't hear you.
Probably 2014. 2014 is when we began to make personnel changes in that office. 2014 or 2013. Because when the report came out, we had been timely for 100% timely a year, so we had been working towards that aim prior to the report coming out, and even prior to the investigation of the office.
So how could it get so bad that 81% of the complaints were not acted on in a timely manner? How did that happen?
Congressman, it's important to realize this is one division within 13 divisions that we have at USDA. It's one division. We have 13 different divisions that have around 140 employees. This division was lacking. Once we realized it was lacking, we began to make every adjustment that we could. And as I've said before, moving persons around, getting new personnel in, getting new leadership in, and really reconstituting the office, in addition to a new vendor that we had to procure out and remove the other one that was not doing the job properly.
Let me say that I just think we got it, Ms. Lago and Ms. Leonard. We got to do better. You all are presidential appointments,
I am.
and you, Ms. Lago. All right. So you'll still be there, Ms. Lago. When I hear what Ms. Donnelly said as compared to what you said, I'm sorry. We've got a long way to go, and I know you're sensitive to these issues. I understand what you said about your background, but when I think we got a lot more to do. And you know, I've tried a lot of cases in my life, but I got to tell you, as I sit here and I watch Ms. Rice, it's very painful. I mean, I can feel her pain. And she said something that I want you to think about. And Mr. Gowdy alluded to this, and I think the chairman did too. We're men, so we may not be able to feel everything that you feel, but you talked about your husband. That we can relate to, even, and how he felt as a man that he could not protect you. And then to see you, the idea of seeing you pack up your lunch, get dressed, and march out every day to a place where you are in fear. That's not right. So we got to deal with this, and the idea that we have a 40-year history. And so, Ms. Rice, I hope that you, and I know the chairman agrees with me on this, if you feel that you're being retaliated against, you know how to get a hold of our offices. I beg you. I'm not asking, I beg you. And I mean that, to do that. Because we want to do everything in our power to surround you with some protection. And it pains me to even say that we have to be about the business of protecting a federal employee who simply wants to do a job. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, again for calling this hearing.
Thank you. Very well said. I appreciate that. Now recognize Ms. Kelly for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lago, I want to discuss some of the discrimination and harassment suits that have been brought against the Forest Service over the years. One of the requirements of the consent decree was to bring the California staff in line with the percentage of women in the civilian workforce. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was this achieved?
I don't know if it was achieved during the period that it was in effect.
You don't know if it was achieved?
No, I don't.
After that consent decree expired, there were more allegations of discrimination, and there was another class action suit in 1995. Ms. Donnelly, you were the lead plaintiff in that class action. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And that class action resulted in another consent decree. Is that correct? Right?
Yes.
Okay. What changes to the Forest Service policies were required by that consent decree?
There was mostly administrative injunctive relief. We had a group of people that we put together to work on some issues. We looked at the performance evaluations and made changes to the evaluations so that there would be more accountability. That's no longer there. After the consent decree ended, they took it out again. There was a mentoring program. There was a investigation process for reprisal. There was a scholarship program and a women's conference every year. There was a woman's special emphasis program manager put in place in the region, and things that we were trying to change the culture so that women could feel comfortable using these processes and kind of make up for past problems that were caused so that they could move past some of the things that had happened to them.
Except for the one thing you mentioned, is everything else still in place?
No, they dropped just about everything. It was incredible. The consent decree ended in 2006, and within a couple days, I got a call from one of the women that was in a meeting. They announced that it was over, and one of the men stood up, and they clapped, and they said, "We're back." And shortly after that, the agency dropped almost everything that was in that consent decree. And I believe that's one of the reasons that they started backsliding. And in 2008, I started contacting the secretary and the chief again, saying, we're going back to the way it was.
Just the idea that someone would stand up and say, "We're back," is utterly ridiculous.
Yes.
And so even though you did all of those things that couldn't have done much for changing the culture of the environment.
It didn't change the culture at all. And one of the reasons it didn't is because Region 5, the Forest Service, looked at the items they had to implement as something they were just ordered to do. It was not something they felt they wanted to do or they wanted to incorporate and make changes. They did it because they had to do it, and they were waiting for it to get over to not have to do it.
So they didn't see the need for it.
No,
Comes down.
and they still don't.
Ms. Rice, it is my understanding that there's another complaint making its way through the EEO process even now. Have you attempted to mediate this complaint? If so, what happened during that attempt? Ms. Rice?
She's my representative.
Oh, okay.
I have to let her tell me. Was it the?
Who's ever comfortable in answering is fine.
Go ahead. It was January.
It was at the, when I went to,
San Francisco.
oh, when I went to San Francisco? Okay. The class action? Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Just asking about there's another complaint making
yes.
its way through the EEO process.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. We would have a class action lawsuit.
And what are next steps that you guys are thinking about? Whoever wants to answer.
I can answer that.
Okay.
There was an opportunity to mediate in January 2015, and 6 of the class agents and myself, we went back. At the cost of the taxpayer, they brought all the women in and said they wanted to mediate. So we went to San Francisco. We were pretty excited about it. We thought we're finally getting some dialogue from the agency. The women put a lot of effort into it. They had notes, and they had flip charts and ideas, and it was a pretty vibrant process for them, and so there was a lot of hope. So we came into the room, and there were attorneys, agency attorneys from Washington and region, and there was a mediator judge. We brought in our flip charts. We brought 2 of our own facilitators. And unfortunately, all the agency would do, we had about an hour of general discussion, introductions and discussion. And then the agency, the judge wanted to talk to us separate, and we started going through our flip charts, and the judge got excited about it because she could see we had put a lot of effort into working some resolutions out. She went to get she went to talk to the agency, came back, and she was kind of excited, and she came back and she seemed kind of upset. And she brought the agency in, and they just said, "We don't want to talk." And they just walked away from the table. And since that time, nothing has happened, nothing. We're still waiting for a judge to be assigned.
I know my time is up, but I just wanted to say I watched Good Morning America this morning, and this was a very topic, and it's just unbelievable how widespread this issue is with many different entities. Thank you.
Thank you. We now recognize the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Lawrence, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As many of you know, I stated on the record that I was an EEO investigator prior to coming to Congress. It's totally unacceptable for any woman or man to be in a work environment where they are subjected to sexual harassment. I have a question for Ms. Largo, because I know for a fact that the tone is set from the management of any work environment, what is acceptable in that workforce. When there is a complaint of discrimination, it is directed to the individuals who have the responsibility of that workforce. So I'm going to ask you a question, Ms. Lago, I'm sorry. In the assessment for 2013, the Forest Department selected no in response to the question, and I quote, "Do senior managers meet with and assist the EEO director and other EEO program officials in identification of barriers that may be impeding the realization of an equal employment opportunity?" In fact, the Forest Service wrote in response to that question, and I quote, "Leadership is not fully engaged." That was 2013. Can you explain why that situation existed?
I can't fully explain why that existed in 2013, but I can tell you that the opposite is true in 2016. And we have our top leadership engaged and meeting with our civil rights leadership throughout the country. Since 2013, our civil rights organization has been redesigned. The organization reports directly to the chief. The civil rights director has direct meetings with the chief.
When you say chief, which chief?
The chief of the Forest Service.
Okay. You told our staff that the head of the EEO function began reporting to the head of the Forest Department earlier this year. However, in the Forest Service assessment, the agency marked yes to the question, is the EEO director under the direct supervision of the agency head? Did the EEO director report to the agency head back in fiscal year 2013, or was this a wrong report?
In 2013, well, for as long as I've been in my job.
And that's been how long?
Since 2011.
Okay.
The civil rights director, the head of EEO, reports to the chief prior to 2014. It reported through my office. After 2014, that position reports directly to the chief.
So if there is a complaint of a department, and that's very unusual, if there's a complaint of a department, that complaint is managed by the director of the department where the complaint is happening? To give you an example, if the Forest Department, there's someone in the Forest Department files an EEO complaint to the EEO director, then the EEO director is subjected to supervision by the director. Is that correct? The chief?
The chief, that's correct.
Is that normal for all federal agencies?
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
So you're telling me that the EEO director, so anyone that files an EEO complaint in the Forestry Department to the EEO director, that EEO director is now subjected to supervision by the chief of that department?
I think the 18 agencies, Forest Service being one of them, on the informal side, they control that informal process. But the minute you file formal, you come to our office.
Right, I understand that.
And as an EEO investigator, I know that you should. So the minute we intake the case, we do the investigation of the case. So the Forest Service.
And who do you report to?
Secretary of OSAC.
What department?
Office of the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights.
Okay.
So we take it out of the department's hands and we process the case so they won't do their own investigation. That actually changes.
What is the percentage of these cases that were filed informally that went formal
About
in the
50%.
Forestry Department?
About 50%.
About 50%. So about 50% of them are managed through the actual head of the department, the
No,
chief.
No, they're resolved.
The resolve,
In the
right.
informal stage.
I have another question. Ms. Largo, you stated that it's better now. In your opinion, am I interpreting that right? That now the allegations and the concerns in 2013 no longer exist and that it's better? Are you stating on the record that the serious issues with discriminations are in the past and that currently your department, the Forest Department, is now not in the same place?
What I'm saying is we've improved over the last 5 years. We've improved both from the standpoint of holding people accountable for misconduct as well as reducing incidences of workplace discrimination. And that's borne out, in my opinion, by the declines in complaints based on gender, the declines in complaints based on sexual harassment, and the declines in actual findings of discrimination.
Mr. Chair, I know that my time has expired. I just want to close with this. It's unfortunate that we have to have hearings on this in 2016. I'm a fierce fighter when it comes to having a work environment that does not discriminate, does not sexually harass. And as a federal agency sitting on this oversight committee, I will be continuously, and I will start monitoring the number of cases that are being filed. And I'm going to hold you at your word that it is improving. We will like zero tolerance. That's the objective. But it must continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank the gentleman. We'll now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Liu.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member Cummings, for calling this important hearing. And thank you, Ms. Donnelly and Ms. Rice, for your courage in testifying. I'd like to drill down a little bit deeper on the workplace environment assessment. About a year ago, and this is directed at Ms. Lago, as you know, a consulting firm produced a workplace environment assessment report for the Forest Service's Pacific Southwest region. Just over 1,000 employees responded to their survey, and while the survey found that the majority of participants surveyed were relatively satisfied with their workplace environment, the survey also found, and I quote, "Women were consistently less favorable than men on all aspects of workplace environment." Based on this report, have you assessed why women are less satisfied with their work environment in the Pacific Southwest region?
Well, we've taken several follow-up actions as a result of that survey and that report. First of all, we disseminated the report to all the employees and held discussion groups about the findings. We've created a position in the regional office that is an ombudsman for the work environment, who is a person people in the field can go to directly to elevate issues. We've created civil rights and OGC partnership teams that go out to forests and do trainings, listening sessions on civil rights, and in particular to help people understand retaliation, what their rights are with regard to retaliation, et cetera.
Okay. And I apologize, this was already asked before, but I'm just going to ask it again. The survey also found that fear of retaliation is a concern for a substantial percentage of employees in the region. And if you could elaborate on whether the steps you have taken you believe have mitigated that.
Right. I did, but I'd be happy to repeat. So in our experience, fear of retaliation is a problem. And the problem is that because it's a perception, it's hard to validate. It suppresses people, and so people don't take action. And so what we've been developing are courses and trainings, and that, in the last part of my last answer, discussion groups around perceptions of retaliation, how to give people more comfort and confidence to bring up issues when they fear retaliation.
Has this survey been administered in other regions?
Not specifically. There was a similar survey not by this organization for our law enforcement branch, and there is a climate assessment underway in our Washington office research branch.
Do you believe other regions should also be given this survey?
Well, I think it's a great idea for any region. Yes, I do.
And is there a way you can help make that happen so that other regions are also given this survey?
Yes, I can do that.
Great. Thank you. With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter the following documents into the record. Statement by Dr. Lita Kobziar, President of the Association for Fire Ecology. Statement of Melissa Moore of the United States Forest Service, and May 18, 2015 letter from the Office of Special Counsel to the USDA. Without objection, so ordered. We're trying to get a video. I think that we may have it. So let's now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings.
Ms. Lago, there's been a lot of back and forth about your knowledge of Ms. Rice's case. I want to be fair to you today, and so I'm going to play the clips of your testimony from today's hearing. I want you to take a look at this.
Ms. Lago, Ms. Rice testified that the details of her complaint were made public. Why would that possibly happen?
Well, it is not permitted. It's the first time that I've heard the details were made public. Per our protocol, only people involved in the investigation.
Listen, I don't want to be rude, but I really don't give a damn about protocol. Do you doubt what Ms. Rice just testified to, that the details of her accusations and allegations were made public?
Well, I'm just saying, I never heard that before now. I'm just
So
saying,
do you doubt it, is my question. Not whether or not you've heard it, do you doubt it?
No, I don't doubt it.
Okay. Well, if it's against protocol, as you say, and you don't doubt that it happened, what have you done about it?
I just heard it. I just heard about it.
What are you going to do about it?
I'm going to ask what happened following her investigation, who knew about it, and why.
We have this article that appeared in the Huffington Post, and it appeared, this apparently was this is a scathing article about your department, about agriculture, and it details Ms. Rice's case. I mean, it's public right here. It even has a picture of her in it. When did you come on board?
In August of 2011.
Well, you just said that you didn't even know about it. I can't imagine that somebody could have an article, it's about 16, 17 pages, and it's got this picture of her, and it describes her situation in detail, but you just said, sitting here at the table today, you just realized that it had been made public. You didn't read this article?
If I may clarify, what I said I didn't know about was that her
You said you didn't know it had gone.
shared with district rangers. I wasn't aware of that. I was aware of this case.
And that this had been public, made public.
Ms. Lago, following up on Mr. Gowdy and Ranking Member Cummings' comments, I don't believe you. When you said you didn't know about this, I also have a copy of this article from the Huffington Post. Out here, no one can hear you scream. It's amazing to me that this has been going on so long, and it's escalating. It's not getting better. How do you respond to that? And would you answer truthfully?
Thank you. I'd like to clarify, I did not intend to say that I didn't know about this. I do know about this. I thought the gentleman was asking me, did I know that her investigation had been shared with district rangers? That is what I was saying I didn't know about. Yes, I knew about this case.
Now, that clip, we heard you say that you did know that her investigation had been shared with district rangers. You said you did not. Is that right? I can't hear you.
That's correct.
Well, this is why I'm confused. You said you read the article that we referred to,
Yes,
the
I
Huffington
did.
Post,
I read it when it came out, yes,
and that was in March of 2016, right?
correct.
Well, the Huffington Post article, and this is a quote from that article. It says and I quote, in 2012, at the district ranger's request, Rice's supervisor called an all-hands meeting, called an all-hands meeting. Rice was certain that Beckett would be on the agenda. She begged not to have to attend, but said she was required to show up. Rice's former supervisor couldn't verify this, but said that the meeting was handled insensitively. Nobody took into consideration that maybe she was still feeling like the target in the case. Now, this is the one that got me. This is continuing. To quote, the situation with Beckett was discussed in front of at least 50 colleagues. Rice walked out in tears. I think that was the worst thing that ever happened to me, she said. That's the end of quote. So did you or didn't you? No. About the Rangers. Because I'm confused.
So what I'm attempting to say is I heard Ms. Rice say her investigative report was shared with Rangers. What I imagine that means is the transcripts was passed out to district Rangers. Maybe I misinterpreted. I am sorry. I apologize. But that's what was a surprise to me.
So you did know that her testimony, that the district Rangers knew about it? I mean, they knew about her case and the facts of it. That's what I meant to say.
Yes, I do.
All right, that's all. All right, thank you.
I'll now recognize myself. I'm glad we're having this hearing, and I think you're seeing and feeling the bipartisan frustration. And we're not going to let go of this. You haven't dealt with it appropriately. You've had years to deal with it. Here's the vicious cycle, and I see this above and beyond just the Forest Service, quite frankly, but here's the vicious cycle. In most cases, women, but it happens to men as well, there is some sort of inappropriate behavior to outright rape. It is so difficult. I can't even imagine. I mean, Mr. Cummings talked about this. I can't even imagine having to go through this, let alone trying to recount it, let alone trying to document it, and how brave and how courageous people have to be, like Ms. Rice, to come forward and do that. I can't even imagine. But when that does happen, here's where I see and we see this repetitive behavior, and it's a total failing of the system. That should be reported to law enforcement. And oftentimes it is, because it's a crime. And law enforcement will look at it and say, well, you know what, the government can take care of this itself. And so rather than treating it and prosecuting it as a crime, it's given back to the departments and agencies. Then the department and agency will go and sit, as in this case, and have coffee with this person and say, you know, the case against you is getting a little tougher. Why don't you go and take all of your benefits, all of your retirement, and why don't you just retire, wink, wink. And they're allowed to just walk out the door unscathed. Now, part of this is on Congress. We're going to have some civil service reform. Let's be honest with what Ms. Lago is saying, because this isn't the first time we've heard this. We've heard this at the EPA, from the administrator herself. We've heard this from other departments and agencies. There comes a time where they have to be able to fire somebody, and they can't just let them off the hook and simply retire. I mean, we heard these ridiculous cases over the last several years where they shouldn't get the full benefit if they are proven, if they go through the adjudication process and they can just simply walk away. That's where I hope we do come together in a bipartisan way and break this vicious cycle where these predators can just prey predominantly on women and have no repercussions. We had the one testimony where
Mr.
we have more.
Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lynch.
just on that point, I think the evidence in this case and the testimony in this case has shown that management didn't even explore Title V and the recourse available to them to remove these people who should have been removed. So the law is there. It shouldn't be easy to just fire people for any reason, but for good cause. You can use the law, and I'm a former labor attorney. You have the ability to fire these people. You just chose not to do it. It was either by malfeasance or nonfeasance. Choose whatever course you want. But you had the right to fire these people. You just did not. It may have been because you weren't paying attention, you didn't believe the allegations, but you had the right to fire these people. And you should have, but you didn't. But I agree that we've got to make sure that legal counsel in these departments understand that we will not put up with this crap. Really. This is unconscionable. We all have daughters, go to work every single day. You think we want to see this go on, a workplace like this, where we have, hundreds of complaints about sexual harassment? Fire these people. Or, if you refuse to, then you need to be removed. That's the bottom line. I'll yield back.
Thank the gentleman. So the other thing, and we addressed some legislation to this effect, but we can't have these predators simply bounce from one job to the next. Now, it seems to me that in this particular case, Mr. Beckett, right, is his name, is a small community. They knew what was going on here. To go back and hire him and then subsequently bring him in as a motivational speaker, I can't think of anything more offensive. And you have to take a good, hard, deep look in the mirror and figure out what in the world the Department of Agriculture is going to do to make sure that never, ever, ever happens again. You could go down to Office Max or Best Buy and get a piece of software off the shelf and create a little database and say, this is the do not hire, do not interact list. You can do that for about $50, okay? I don't want to hear about any more excuses. And I don't want the Department of Agriculture, why don't they blaze the trail? Why don't they, let's actually have them lead in this area rather than deal with this for 40 years. I don't ever want to have to call you up here again, but I do want to know that you're leading the way. But you're not going to prove that until you actually do it. We hear too many people say, oh, my stats are good, and I did 100% within the time frame and everything that, but the evidence shows to the contrary. So that's what I hope we do accomplish. Lastly, as we gavel down here, particularly to Ms. Rice, thank you for the bravery that you've shown to be here and do this. This is not a dream come true testifying before Congress. But I hope you do know how inspirational you are to a lot of women, and you represent a lot of voices that are quiet and silent, and they're watching on their computer or TV. And I hope when you go back and visit with your husband that there's satisfaction in that. It's helpful to us, and we want to be part of that solution, and I know you do too. And Ms. Donnelly, thank you as well for your leadership on this.
Mr. Chairman, would you just reiterate what I said about making sure that she's protected? Because I want to make it clear that we're on the same page.
There is no daylight between what Mr. Cummings is saying and what I'm saying as the chairman of this committee too. On behalf of all of the members, we will go to the end of the earth to protect you and the other women that have gone through this. But don't be bashful in picking up that phone and letting us know. It will be answered, and we will respond. And to those in management and in other positions, I'm telling you what, we will use every power we possibly can from this pulpit to make sure that they are treated with dignity and never have to go through that again in any way, shape, or form. You will see more subpoenas and more hearings than you can possibly imagine if we hear one thing about any sort of reprisal in any way, shape, or form. I can't say that strongly enough. This has been a good hearing. I appreciate the four of you taking time and testifying today. Last thing, Mr. Leonard, within 2 weeks, I expect that Mr. Cummings' letter, the letter that we jointly did, gets responded in its totality. 2 weeks. Committee stands adjourned.